The next business in front of us, we have a set of 3 appointments to the Coastal Resource Management Council, and we've received a great deal of testimony from the public regarding all 3 candidates that are before us. And so in order to address this most efficiently, what I would like to do is have each of the candidates make brief remarks. Then after each candidate gives remarks, have the committee the opportunity to ask questions after each candidate, and then move to public testimony before we discuss any motions. We do have 7 members of the public registered to testify. So, but before that, I want to bring before us the next item for discussion is the reappointment of Raymond Coia, Vice Chair, appointed elected official representing a coastal municipality over 25,000 to the Coastal Resource Management Council for a term expiring January 31st, 2024. Mr. Coia, I know this is a reappointment, and if you would be able to give some brief remarks to the committee, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Senate Committee. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you and speak as it relates to confirmation for my reappointment as Vice Chair and a member of the Coastal Resources Management Council. I've been proud to have served on that council for many years. I'd like to think that during that tenure, I've brought integrity, knowledge, and fairness to all of those that come before us. Having served for quite some time on it, I can easily say we've had our easy applications and we have had our contentious applications. And I'd like to say that personally, I've always afforded everyone fairness. I've listened to all of the evidence. I've weighed the evidence in the way that I see proper. And I can state that during that tenure, I've worked well with members of the council, staff, employees of the council. I've always had a great working relationship with council members and our chairmen and chairwomen. So I think my background affords a good opportunity for me to continue serving there. I am an attorney by education. I've had an opportunity to practice law, serve as a municipal court judge, as well as administer a health and safety fund for my organization. During my career, I've had many opportunities to afford evidence its due weight and deliberate personally and with other members of the body that I'm with, to come up with a fair and equitable resolution or decision applying the principles of law and the facts of the case. So I enjoy it. I respectfully request your consideration for approval of my reappointment, and I would stand ready to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Coia. Do any of the members of the committee have any questions? Senator DiMario.
Hi, Mr. Coia. My name is Alana DiMario, and I represent the communities of Northern Narragansett and Eastern North Kingstown. And one of the things that is clear from a lot of the communication I've gotten from my constituents on these reappointments is the priority of both maintaining as well as looking for opportunities to expand public access to the shore. And so what do you see in terms of your role on the council and prioritizing that idea of making sure that we're looking for new opportunities to find good public access points to the shore and making sure that those points aren't infringed upon?
Well, as it relates to finding opportunities, obviously I defer to the opportunities that come before us and applications that may come before us that may afford the individuals or residents opportunity to access it. I can tell you in particular one area that we have, I don't want to say concern, but that we make sure we do consideration is with the building of docks. We always want to make sure that there is a requisite height so that the people can traverse under it and that they have access to the beach and public access to the shore. So I can say that that's one area that we do afford much consideration. Anytime a dock is coming in front of us, when there have been issues, I can state specifically, we have asked the applicant to raise the dock to afford that access. And for the most part, if they see that that's the way that it's going to get approved, they will agree to do that. So I do totally understand and appreciate what your constituents' concerns are, and I think that in our decision-making process, we do weigh that accordingly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions from committee members? Senator Valverde.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Coia. So one question that I received was about the decision-making authority of the CRMC. And the question was if other state agencies have the director make decisions on applications and enforcement by relying on the agency staff expertise, but it seems to be different with this council. So I guess I'm saying, what makes the council qualified to make decisions instead of the director?
I'm not understanding your question. Did you say that other agencies rely more on staff opinions than us?
Yes.
Okay. Well, how our process works is when an application is heard before us at a public hearing, I'll give you an example of that. Our chairwoman will have a representative from staff give a presentation as it relates to the review of the file, give their opinion. We do have a record. We have the application. Within that is contained the material in which they give an opinion. Sometimes they'll defer to the council. Sometimes they will say that they're in favor of it. They're not in favor of it. That is their opinion. And then traditionally, the applicant may have an attorney with them to make certain arguments as it relates to the opinion of the staff member, and also put forth experts on particular fields that maybe the individual staff member from CRMC may not have the credentials as it relates to the matter at hand. So I don't want it to say that, and I know maybe some people may say, well, CRMC staff recommended denying it, and at the conclusion of the hearing, CRMC council voted in favor of it. Well, I do want to say that their opinion is afforded its due weight. We do consider it. It is for our use in deliberation, but we also take forth any other evidence that the applicant may put forth, any expert testimony, testimony from the individual themselves, witnesses. So there's a lot more that goes in it than just the one opinion of the CRMC staff member. And many times we do. We rely on that. They are the experts. They're well credentialed. But on occasion, we may say that the weight of the evidence goes the other way. So I personally would say I always consider it, and I welcome it because they are the experts and they know more than me on some of the materials, and that's basically my answer.
Okay. And it's one follow-up, if I may, Madam Chair. Is that CRMC staff, are they represented at hearings
CRMC staff will be at the hearing. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, and they give input during hearings?
Absolutely. Yeah, they will give, our current chairwoman will call upon them to make a presentation of the case for the benefit of the members. They give their summation of the case and the history and the travel of the case. And then they are available for questions of council members and through the chair if the applicant has questions for them as well. So they do play an integral role, and we do welcome them and appreciate the time and effort that they put on every single application that comes before us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any additional questions for this witness? Okay, thank you, Mr. Coia. If you can just hold tight, we will bring forward the reappointment of Donald Gomez, appointed representing coastal community with a population less than 25,000 to the Coastal Resource Management Council for a term expiring January 31st, 2024. This is a reappointment for Mr. Gomez, and so Mr. Gomez, if you would address the committee.
Hello, can everybody hear me, Madam Chair?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to do a little different here, maybe. You have my advice and consent questionnaire, and I will happily answer any questions. I know it's fairly extensive. I would just like to get into some of my thoughts on CRMC, why I enjoy being a member, and what do I bring to the table. I have worked with the Navy for 57 years, and just after Christmas, I decided I probably worked long enough. I worked 33 years prior to retirement, and I've been a consultant with them ever since. When I was a civil servant, I had the privilege to work with some of the very finest engineers, scientists, and admin support people in the Navy RDT&E community. I further enjoyed the association with numerous universities as I pursued my career. Towards the end, when I decided to retire, I had 128 such professionals working for me, and I was starting to feel more like a babysitter than an engineer. But there was always a new problem to solve, and I loved solving problems. I think I've just described my relationship with Coastal Resources, one of the best organizations in the state. They have some of the finest engineers, scientists, and admin. They're well organized, well managed, and there's always some new problems. Times have changed. We must adapt. Today we face climate change. Wind farms are coming. The ocean is warming. This is bringing numerous impacts for the state of Rhode Island. Coastal Resources needs to be responsive to our ocean-oriented industries. Prime example, EB, a growing and nationally important business. We need to support these types of industries as well as the labor unions associated with them. We need to increase and maintain jobs. Coastal Resources is involved with this, and we need to ensure that we provide a strong foundation from which these industries can prosper. Our fishermen are facing declining catches as the water warms. Our agriculture initiative at CRMC is helping, but each new farm or new extension needs to be well thought out, and allowances made for all the other uses of the waters, bays, estuaries, etc. Our squid industry may be impacted by the necessary wind farms associated with the climate change. Each use must consider the others. Compromise is often necessary, and when matters such as these come in front of the council, compromise is often accomplished. But be brief, be gone. I need to close I would like to just highlight some tools that have been or are being put into place and carry coastal resources forwarding in the changes environment and in which I have been heavily involved. The OSAMP is probably the first document that I went from beginning to end on. The beach SAMP is now in process and coming along nicely. We're involved with URI's storm tools to help with predictions and modeling associated with coastal resources, permits, and the ocean flooding and what's going to happen with rising sea levels, et cetera. CRMC has a very important tool which is going to help us, especially with the offshore efforts of the wind farms and finding that we can work with the wind farms along with our fishermen. Federal consistency is the name of that tool. Adoption of new technologies by coastal resources is also coming along, and to streamline how the day-to-day business is conducted. The director, Jeff Willis, has a new initiative going on that, and it's coming along nicely. I close by noting my journey with the coastal resources since 2007, when I was first appointed, has been a varied and exciting trip. I would like to stay in this ride a while longer if you are so inclined. I feel I have the technical background and now the corporate knowledge to support my reassignment to CRMC. I would note that I think I may be the only member with a strong technical background on the board, but we do have representative from DEM that also has some technical background. I thank you for your time and will answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Your remarks I find especially compelling because I actually came to Rhode Island because of the work that the CRMC was doing in the Ocean SAMP and trying to make sure that they were doing smart siting for the Black Island Wind Farm. So, I thank you for your leadership during the time and making sure that that happened, because I think you're right. We are facing an unprecedented level of development off our coastline, and I think while it's good because we need to hit our targets to reduce carbon, you are absolutely correct. We need to balance the interests in our fishing communities and other coastal interests in order to be able to do that well. So I appreciate those remarks, and so thank you for that. Are there any other members of the committee who want to have any questions or want to comment on this witness? Senator DiMario.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Mr. Gomez. I don't know if you heard my question to your colleague, Mr. Coia, earlier, but my question to you is the same. The constituents that I represent, both the small businesses that rely on tourism in this area, Narragansett and North Kingstown, as well as the residents for their own personal enjoyment and recreation, are really committed to making sure that we are finding ways to prioritize public access to the shore. And so I just wanted to relay that question to you as well in terms of, what do you see as your role, or, how much of a priority is that for you in your work with the CRMC to maintain public access to the shore?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of that. I live in Little Compton, represent Little Compton. I was a council president for a while and a school committee. I've been there 77 years, which is quite a long time. When I was a kid, there were rights of ways everywhere. Little Compton is now down to 3. Mm-hmm. One of them goes around a parking lot at Secundit Point, which the Secundit Point Club was forced to put in. One of them is just a road down to the Secundit River from the West Main Road. Mm-hmm. I have watched numerous rights of ways disappear. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to go into real depth with that, but what I will say is that the Coastal Resources has a rights of way committee that is very active. I am not on it. I am on several committees. And I'm not on that, but it does, those issues are brought up by staff, by the director usually when something is happening. So at each meeting that something has happened along those lines, it is brought to the council. I support those efforts. They are very active in trying to do this. There have been some cases I remember that have come to us that involved neighbors shutting down rights of ways to the beach as large houses get built and property gets put up. We also have the issue of the who owns the ocean in the state of Rhode Island. As you know, we are one of the only states, probably the only state, that the water, and it has been categorized as below mean high water, belongs to us. Mm-hmm. We try to follow that very much. We do get efforts to try to close it down by where is mean high water type of discussions, but it's a constant battle. And I know that Coastal Resources is very much behind what your objective is, and use all the tools to their means to try to keep that up and to actually increase rights of ways. While I've been there, there have been several rights of ways added, Barrington, Bristol, those types of areas.
Mm-hmm. I thank you for your response and also for your commitment to that issue. And you spoke exactly to something I was going to say, which is just that idea of not just trying to defend the existing ones, but also looking for opportunities to expand. So thank you. I do have one follow-up question, and it is also related to that concept of balance that you were talking about. And, you know, one of the issues that has been brought to our attention through a lot of the written testimony is the idea of balance on the council. And so I was wondering if you would support the idea of, in the future, when there are openings, adding somebody to the council, at least one member who has a history in either volunteer sector or governmental sector environmental activism.
Yeah, I don't think that I would have any objection whatsoever to that. And I think many of our members have inclinations along those lines. I see all manner of scenarios, if you will, represented in all these, and a lot of this comes up while the council is hearing petitions to us to, objections, things that need to be involved, and it almost always involves a compromise. Mm-hmm. Even the staff produces extremely well-documented reports to us, and they do provide a 1 or 2 page summary that sometimes summarizes 100 pages that are in front of us. They do an excellent job, and they help support us in decisions to reach a compromise. And normally when we do that, if all parties are in agreement, the director will take that back to Coastal and work on that. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions for this witness from the committee? Okay, and Mr. Gomez, thank you for your testimony. If you would just hang tight with us for a moment.
Okay.
And I want to bring forward the reappointment of Jennifer R. Cervenka, Chair, a public member to the Coastal Resources Management Council for a term expiring January 31st, 2024. Ms. Cervenka, thank you for joining us, and excuse me, Chairwoman, and if you would please give some opening remarks to the committee. Thank you.
Sure. Can everyone hear me okay? Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Jennifer Cervenka. It's a pleasure to be here tonight to address you on the matter of my reappointment, if you so choose, as chair of the Coastal Resources Management Council. I've served in this capacity as chair since the summer of 2017. so about 3.5 years. I'm also the chair of the Policy and Planning Subcommittee, and perhaps of some interest to Senator DiMario, the chair of the Rights of Way Subcommittee. During the time that I've served as chair, I've presided over more than 100 applications, many of which have been contested proceedings. Probably not as much as Mr. Coia and Mr. Gomez, but still a lot. And I have considered legislation, voted on regulatory changes, and I've had a heavy planning aspect to my position in addition to presiding over the public hearings. I take seriously the charge that each application that comes before the council must be reviewed against the standards that are articulated in our regulations and our enabling statute. We must both protect our natural coastal resources and promote the economic growth that is coastal dependent. We must also provide sufficient opportunity for the public to participate in our public hearings and to comment upon and provide relevant information on the important projects that come before us. During my tenure as chair, I've developed very close working relationships with senior staff and with our executive director and legal counsel. And I'm more or less, communicating on a daily basis with our executive director on matters of the day. As some of you might know, as the pandemic started, the agency was itself about to go into a period of change and transition. Our former executive director, Grover Fugate, who had served in that role for over 3 decades, had retired in May of 2020. I was part of a search committee, as well as Mr. Coia, to find a replacement. We conducted interviews, reviewed resumes. We ultimately selected the then current Deputy Director, Jeffrey Willis, to succeed Mr. Fugate. And he's done an outstanding job at moving the agency forward and keeping the agency functional during the pandemic. In addition to our executive director, the agency has had to manage other senior staff retirements. We now have a very talented deputy director, Mr. Jim Boyd, a new aquaculture coordinator, Ben Getz, and a new policy analyst, Leah Feldman. The agency has lost and needs to fill engineering, policy, coastal geologist positions, and several other senior staff are scheduled to retire over the next couple of years. So as a small 28-person agency, succession planning has taken up a considerable amount of time and energy of myself, of the executive director, of other members of the council, and it will continue to have to be managed carefully. During my time, as has been touched on by Mr. Gomez, we've reviewed federal projects for Rhode Island coastal effects, including the first commercial size offshore wind facility. We've enacted the shoreline change SAMP, or Special Area Management Plan, for coastal resiliency and coastal hazard mitigation. We've authorized the dredging of the Providence River, and we've wrestled with the difficult balancing issues presented by the vastly increasing number of aquaculture lease applications, among other important issues to the state. In addition, in 2019 and 2020, we were evaluated twice from top to bottom. First by NOAA, that's our federal partner that provides much of our funding. And they reviewed us for our programs, functionality, organizational structure, And we had a similar process that was undertaken by a Rhode Island interagency team, Department of Administration, DEM, CRMC, the governor's office. Both evaluations and findings were very favorable to the agency, with some recommendations made on continued succession planning, improved customer service, increased stakeholder involvement, and strengthened enforcement. Should I be reappointed to my position as chair, my near-term priorities will include the promulgation of new administrative penalty regulations for the agency, continuing education and training for council members, identification of quality candidates to fill open council positions. We talked a little bit about that in questioning, and I'm open to a diverse candidate pool. Continued support for the ongoing transition of senior staff, and increased designation of rights of way that have been identified to us by municipalities. A long-term goal of which I probably don't have much control over is putting together an electronic permitting database. That would be something we would do in coordination with DEM. That would be for permitting online, for access to records online, which would be a game changer as far as customer service, transparency, and processing of applications in a more expedited fashion. I'd also note that I do work very closely with the two other council members who are here with me tonight, Mr. Gomez and Mr. Coia. And I want you to know that both men have spent over 30 hours of additional time over the last couple of months, in addition to their regular work on the council, to serve on a subcommittee with me on an aquaculture lease. In general, they put so much time and effort into the council. I want you to know that they're both hardworking, engaged, professional, knowledgeable about our coastal programs, and 100% dependable. As you know, Mr. Coia sat on the search committee with me for the new executive director. Mr. Gomez serves on all the subcommittees I sit on. They're the type of volunteers that you want to sit on your state board. So I urge their reappointment. Finally, if I can just briefly address two issues that have come up with Senators DiMario and Valverde. With respect to the rights of way, I would just add that we do have a rights of way subcommittee, and we do have a list of rights of way that have been identified to us by various municipalities. And we have 3 that have gone through the process. There's a whole process associated with designating them, taking in testimony, going before the subcommittee, and then going before the full council. So it's a 4 or 5 step process. With respect to 3 rights of way in North Kingstown, we've gone through the whole process up to the full council decision. So that, and that's a priority that should happen within the first half of this year. We have approximately 10 more rights of way that have been identified. This is how we get it. We get it from municipalities, and in some cases, individuals will identify rights of way. But they come to us. We have a list. In fact, the evaluation that was done by NOAA, one of their recommendations was to do this type of work. So we are, it is a priority, but our federal partner has strongly encouraged us to work on it. And so we're at it. We're starting on it. With respect to the council and the value of the council and being qualified, the only thing I would add to what Mr. Coia said, who stated it, I think, very well, is just in many of these cases that come before us, they're contested. There's a substantial amount of public comment that goes along with them. When you have a council proceeding, these members of the public get an opportunity to voice their concerns, ask their questions in a way that wouldn't be found if you didn't have a council, if you just had a director making a decision. So it does have an aspect to it that is highly transparent and should give public confidence in the ultimate decision made. That's the only thing that I wanted to add there, that I think there's a benefit to the general public that the council makes these decisions. Also, I would note that if the council makes a decision that's contrary to a staff recommendation, so the staff being the experts at CRMC, it has to be substantiated in the record. And we don't often go against our staff members. We're often in agreement with them. Occasionally, there might be testimony at a protracted hearing, and we take that into consideration in balancing impacts. And so we might end up with a different result there. But generally, we do act consistently with our staff. So that was probably a little bit longer than I should have gone given your time frame, but I just wanted to go over where we are in the process with succession planning and our recent evaluations, and anticipate a couple of questions. So I thank you for your time. I'm happy to take questions now.
Thank you, Chairwoman. That was very, very informational, and I really appreciate the level of detail that you shared with the committee. Everyone was so sad, happy for Grover, sad for the state when he retired. He definitely was a wealth of knowledge and really helped bring CRMC so far in the years that he was there. And so I appreciate the challenge that you're facing with the succession planning, and higher level staff with so much institutional knowledge. Moving on is always a challenge, especially for a body that oversees such a wide variety of very technical information. So I appreciate your remarks, and I wanted to see if anyone on the committee has any comments or questions for the chairwoman. Chairman Miller?
Yes, Chairwoman Cervenka. As you might know, my district goes into Providence and abuts the Port of Providence. And so a lot of my concerns come from constituents who either participated in or observed the hearings around the LNG facility. And so a lot of the concern that my community has is based on how those hearings were conducted, and also in the context of your history of also representing National Grid. And I just wanted you to have an opportunity to respond to some of those concerns, and how those hearings went and how you see hearings going in the future, especially if they have an affiliation with National Grid.
Sure. I don't believe that I've represented National Grid, so I don't know how to address that. I don't represent National Grid. And with respect to the conduct of those hearings, I can't recall the exact number of those who commented, but 100 people around. What we did is we created a list for anyone who wanted to speak. People could sign up. We came up with an allotted amount of time that each person could speak. I don't know if it was 3 minutes or 5 minutes, something to that effect. We didn't have the luxury of being able to have an infinite number of hearings because under the what's called federal consistency process, you're on a timeline to render a decision, or you don't get to make a decision, that it just gets taken away under that process. So we did the best that we could in accommodating everyone, the 3 to 5 minute range. Some people would go 10 minutes. And we had 2 or 3 multi-hour meetings. And I think that there was not much more that we could do with the process to allow people to speak. It was a really very difficult proceeding and process because many of the people had concerns that could not be addressed by the CRMC. Under federal consistency, we had the charge of making a determination whether or not what was being proposed would have a quote unquote coastal effect. We didn't consider potential health impacts, societal impacts, whether or not it could be cited there. That just was not within our jurisdiction. We were not issuing a permit. We were evaluating whether something that would receive a federal permit would have a Rhode Island coastal effect, and we determined that it would not. And it was, for me, it was personally agonizing that there were so many other concerns that couldn't be addressed in our proceeding because it was not within our jurisdiction, that there was no other place for them necessarily to be addressed other than, I guess, with the federal government. So, you know, it was one of my first major contested proceedings. And I felt awful for many of these people that, you know, many health concerns that people had that we just couldn't make a decision on.
I follow up with that. I think one of the concerns from a lot of constituents and others beyond my community, which is adjacent to the potential facility, is I know you may not currently represent National Grid, but it's the context that you have a history with National Grid, and would you, in the future, be aware of that perception from the general public and avoid that perception, and maybe if there is a National Grid involvement that comes before CRMC, will consider having somebody else lead those hearings?
Absolutely. If I had a conflict and I represented or in the past represented National Grid, that's something that I would be required to recuse myself for. At the time, I did not have that. I don't quite know how to address it because I didn't have that conflict at the time. But if I did in the future, I would, and I would be required to file an ethics recusal form with the Rhode Island Ethics Commission.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Are there any other committee members who have questions for this witness? I wanted to add on to what you said, Chairwoman, just in the aspect of, you know, the scope of the purview of the commission or the committee in being, or the council, excuse me, in being able to make these decisions. I think one of the issues that we do need to address in Rhode Island law, and I'm hopeful that the Assembly will address, is the addition of environmental justice language in various statutes throughout to really combine looking at those disparate health impacts in combination with environmental concerns. And I think that it is a challenge when you have bodies who need to make determinations based on existing law, not what we wish the law was. So for my part, I will do my best to be able to get you the tools that you need to be able to make decisions that can take in those health impact and environmental justice considerations, and hopefully we'll be able to get get some traction on that here in the Senate.
Thank you. Yes, I know that DEM has been successful with their environmental justice provisions. So there's a model out there that can to.
Thank you. And if there's no other comments from the committee, I do believe we have our first member from the public who wants to testify. And just give us just a minute so we can get them on the phone. All right, I believe we have our first member of the public to testify is Topher Hamblett on the phone.
Yes, I am, Madam Chair.
Topher, welcome to the committee. You are here. I'm not sure if you were able to follow along up to this point, but we do have the members, the three reappointments of the Coastal Resource Management Council before us, and I know that you had signed up to testify, and so if you could address your remarks towards all of the nominees, and if you could limit your remarks to 3 minutes.
I will. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. In our written testimony that we submitted today, we urge this committee to consider these reappointments to the CRMC in the context of what we think is a very flawed structure. Under the system, politically appointed members are empowered to make decisions on permitting and enforcement cases, but they're not required to have any experience whatsoever in these matters. And this system is made worse by the failure of governors past and present to appoint administrative hearing officers as required by law. I will also note that while CRM staff are present at hearings on contested cases, they are not represented by legal counsel, but the applicants and violators of the rules are, and that's a system that needs to be fixed. On these specific nominations, we support the reappointment of Chairwoman Cervenka. Her appointment as chair is the exception to this way of doing business that I described. She's an experienced environmental attorney, and she has also supported and moved many positive changes to CRMC regulations and processes, many of which she listed today. We are supportive of those changes. She's done a great job as chair, and we support her reappointment. We do oppose the reappointments of Mr. Coia and Mr. Gomez. I want to start by saying that this is in no way personal at all. This is about the functioning of CRMC and what the agency does and what it will look like now and in the future. It is about using this opportunity to call on the governor to make new appointments to replace members who have served on the council since 2003 and 2007. New appointees should have expertise and experience in a wide range of coastal issues that impact all coastal communities, including environmental justice communities. Now, I know the committee did not convene today to address the underlying structural issues with CRMC that are put before you, but Save the Bay does urge you to convene the study commission on CRMC, established by Senate resolution 2 years ago, to do that important work. It's long overdue. But for now and for today, you have an opportunity to begin to make changes through the important process of appointments that professionalize the council and make representation on it more inclusive. And with that, I will end my remarks. Thanks for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hamblett. We are getting our next member of the public on the phone right now. While we're waiting for any of the next public caller, if any of the committee members have any follow-up questions based on the public testimony we just heard.
Hello.
Oh, hello. Is this Mr. Jake Kramer?
Yes, speaking. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Senate. I am a concerned citizen and homeowner in Rhode Island. I would request that the Senate not approve the reappointment of Raymond Coia or Donald Gomez to the CRMC committee. Both of these individuals violated the public trust when in late December 2020, they attended a closed meeting with Champlin's Marina and voted to approve an expansion without proper public notice and without the presence or representation of affected parties and stakeholders. I would further call for a full investigation as to how and why this closed vote was conducted, and furthermore, how and why they chose to act in defiance of a prior Superior Court decision. Again, this is just a blatant violation of public trust, and it's exactly the type of backroom dealing that causes citizens to distrust their government. Given these actions, Mr. Coia and Mr. Gomez should not be reappointed to the CRMC, and I would implore the Senate committee to act accordingly. I do sincerely thank you for your time and for the opportunity to provide these comments.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. Do any members of the committee have any questions for this witness? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Kramer. We appreciate your testimony tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Kramer. We appreciate your testimony.
I'll mute as soon as I know I'm on.
I believe, Peter Converse, are you on with us? Are you there?
I am.
Great, thank you. Welcome to the committee. And I'm not sure if you were able to follow along at home, but you are in front of the Senate Committee on Environment and Agriculture, and we are considering the advice and consent of 3 reappointments to the Coastal Resource Management Council. So you can go ahead and address the committee, and I would ask that you keep your testimony to 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Oyer. And yes, I have been following along, and I will try to keep this about 3 minutes. I believe that's what it is. Hopefully I won't run over. I do have some speaking disabilities, so I will try my best to pronunciate as well as I can. Anyway, my name is Peter Converse, and I've spent most of my life in Jamestown, Rhode Island. I love my community and its environment and feel very fortunate to live here. I've always held our CMC in high regard as stewards of our natural resources. Sadly, my viewpoint has changed. In my first true encounter with the council, it was made clear to me prior that CRMC was more likely to side with a commercial shipyard, specifically Safe Harbor Jamestown Boatyard. Safe Harbor Marine is now owned by a multi-billion-dollar corporation. It's an REIT, real estate investment trust, who own 8 other marinas on Narragansett Bay. At issue was the question to whether or not dredging would be allowed in an expanded dock basin accommodating larger and more vessels to be allowed. Nevertheless, I held out hope that the council would listen to the expert, and yes, residents are considered experts of their own community, especially within the corroborated with dozens of others, expert testimony from approximately 25 community members. I don't recall one, with the exception of Safe Harbor staff alone, speaking in favor of this expansion. I will also add that at least 180 other community members attended this online hearing. In addition to that, 500 residents of Jamestown petitioned against the expansion of this shipyard, and for good reason. Without getting into particulars, it was well demonstrated that an expansion on any level would not be conducive to safe recreational navigation, be it swimming, kayaking, paddleboarding, scuba diving, or most importantly, junior sailing programs which ply these waters regularly. Yet when the deliberations started, two council members who are up for reassignment to the CRMC board easily brushed aside these concerns as not under the purview of CRMC purview to consider. Mr. Gomez and Mr. Croman both sided with two other councilors to approve the expansion and dredging. They seem to have been easily swayed by the shipyard's attorney, Mr. DeAngelis, to follow the rule of law, the CRMC Red Book guidelines. However, Council Chair, Ms. Cervenka, pointed out that there are, in fact, provisions under Category B, 131, subparts F and J, which state, quote, the alteration or activity will not result in significant conflict with water-dependent uses and activities such as recreational boating, fishing, swimming, navigation, and commerce. I will also add that that under provision subpart B have not been met either. Our opposition force easily demonstrated where expansion would interfere with these uses within an extremely confined waterway and ashore. Some councilors went as so far that it is the recreational users of this passage who are impeding on the use of the boat yard's marine perimeter limit. Nothing is further from the truth. Another noted, quote, these people are so fortunate to live on the water, end quote, as if to imply we should not oppose the further destruction of this idyllic waterfront and just roll with the punches. Not to mention, I personally do not live on the water or even in this vicinity. So, closing, I ask you to please pause any decision to reappoint either Mr. Gomez or Mr. Coia to this council. I hope the CRMC, my hope is for the CRMC to rebuild and restore greater integrity of CRMC as one which stands by its own doctrines. Thank you for the opportunity to present my perspective on these candidates.
Thank you for your testimony. I appreciate it. And I wanted to give the opportunity to any committee members to ask any questions of this witness. Okay, hearing none, we will work on getting the next witness in front of us. While we're doing that, are there any other questions from the committee for the members or for the appointees?
Hello. This is Chad George. Is somebody speaking to me?
Yes, this is Chairwoman Oyer. Welcome to the Environment and Agriculture Committee, Mr. George. As you may have been able to follow along at home, we have the reappointment of the three CRMC members in front of us, and I would ask that you direct your testimony to cover all three appointments and to keep within a 3-minute limit if possible.
Okay. Is the TV on a lag to this phone call? Because I'm hearing you speak and then you're speaking into the phone.
Yes, I believe there is a bit of a delay.
Okay, that's messing me up. Okay. So tell me when to start.
Yep, you can go ahead. You're live with us now.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Let me turn down the volume, if you wouldn't mind, on my screen.
That's all right.
Good afternoon.
We're all getting used to the tech.
Okay. My name's Chad George. I live at 215 Walcott Avenue in Jamestown. Thank you for allowing me to address you today on an issue so important to the investment I've made in my home in Rhode Island and to our neighborhood and to the property owners throughout the state. I think others have given testimony regarding the importance of a change in how CRMC operates, so I won't speak to that other than to voice my agreement. My testimony relates specifically to the CRMC hearings of October 20th and October 27th, 2020, and my impression of the commissioners at that hearing as a reappointment is the subject of this hearing. I would like to make some brief comments about three commissioners up for reappointment, Chairwoman Jennifer Cervenka, Vice Chairman Raymond Coia, and Commissioner Donald Gomez. I would also like to make some comments about Commissioner Hudner, although not up for reappointment, it was really Commissioner Gomez and Hudner that pushed the approval of the JBY expansion. So it's hard to separate those two in that context. I speak in favor of Chairwoman Cervenka and against reappointments of Vice Chair Coia and Commissioner Gomez and eventually Commissioner Hudner when it comes up. While my comments do align with the votes on the Dumplings Cove issue, I like to add flavor as to why I make these recommendations to disabuse you of the conclusion I'm just a partisan with an axe to grind. First, for context, I'm a homeowner, a sailor who's used 4 Narragansett Bay boat yards, including JBY, and a business owner with over 150 employees. I fully understand the balance between commercial needs, development, and the environment. But I also understand the difference between rights you have paid for and rights that you were granted or assumed over time through no payment or contractual agreement. First, speaking of Commissioner Gomez, I felt he showed disregard of the specific facts of the case and apparent indifference to the specific rules in the Red Book. For example, he focused exclusively on the marina perimeter, which was established years ago in the Type 3 rating of the extended coastline in order to justify allowing JBY, safe harbors, sun communities to do whatever they wanted within that location. This position was without regard to the Red Book rules which Chairwoman Cervenka specifically identified, but Commissioner Gomez ignored in his comments. He referred to Jamestown and Little Compton, where he lives, as sister cities. He specifically referred to things change and that Seconic Harbor has seen significant growth and lines waiting to launch boats and making a comparison to Dumpling Cove. His subtext was clear. Things change, so deal with it whether you like it or not. Well, it seems clear that Little Compton is very different, and if he had visited the site, he would have seen that as opposed to a farming community that still has wide open spaces even today, the Dumplings was densely built out in the 1890s. Seconic Harbor has what appears to be wide open areas around it, including a golf course, few homes, and an artificial water break that was added at some point. This is nothing like Dumplings Cove. While on opposite sides of the Quidneck Island, the two areas are, to me, a relative newcomer, almost diametrically opposite, and only share one item, high real estate prices, which are the real economic engine of Rhode Island and Narragansett Bay. And I think when we talk about the jobs in the marine industry, especially as a business person and business owner, it's important to focus on the difference between local service jobs and jobs that bring money to the state, taxes, employment, and revenues. If you're building boats, you're selling those boats outside. You're bringing profits to the area. If you're a fisherman, you're selling your fish to regional areas, maybe shipped cross country. But if you're a local boat yard, you're servicing local boats. JBY is a local business taking care of the local homeowners' boats, those people who testified against the expansion. I think that Chairwoman Cervenka, on the other hand, referred to specific requirements in the Red Book and was trying to deal with an admittedly difficult trade-off with solutions, while Gomez, Coia, and Hudner were staunch in their support without seeing the natural conflict and necessary trade-offs. They're more focused on the growth in kayaks and paddleboards and crowded boats that are too large in an already overcrowded cove. One classic quote was, "It really didn't matter if the larger docks accommodated one larger boat or two smaller ones. That just showed blatant disregard for the situation people testified about. It makes a huge difference." I would not be testifying tonight if they measured the issue and decided to vote for the applicant. Things go both ways. But if they were doing their jobs, they would have asked more probing questions of the applicant, such as, since you're stating that you need to dredge to accommodate deeper draft boats and not to have to move them within a tide cycle, how many boats that you currently service would need this deeper clearance? How often has it happened? If they asked that critical question, they would have learned that it is virtually none of their current fleet they service. This has been an expansion masquerading as a needed operational improvement from the start, and it is evident to any objective observer. But that did not matter to some of the commissioners. Related to Gomez and Hudner, they referred to having any input or limitation on the marina perimeter as a taking. I found that especially galling, considering that JBY for years was a yard that existed to take care of the homeowners' boats in the neighborhood. Those homeowners who testified against them. Did JBY pay the state for the marina perimeter, like you have to pay for the land you use? I doubt it. So to refer to it as a taking was not only insulting to me, but undoubtedly backwards. JBY, by expanding beyond the original scope in a clearly residential neighborhood, is the one that has been doing the taking a public resource, one that is scenic and historic, specifically because of the residential neighborhood that surrounds it, and turning it into a broader commercial enterprise. Public companies have to show increased earnings each year, and every year or their stock price falters and the game is over. How will JBY make more money for Sun communities other than by taking from our neighborhood and from public resources like the Cove? Vice Chair Coia was relatively silent. He wasn't the protagonist, but backed the incorrect conclusion, and I feel should have asked better questions. So I have voiced rejection of that individual also. Thank you very much for the time to give my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. George. I appreciate your time with us tonight. Are there any members of the committee who have questions for this witness? Okay, thank you, Mr. George. We will move on to our next witness. Mr. Ross, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Great.
This is Chairwoman Oyer with the Environment and Agriculture Committee, and you are in front of the committee, and we are considering the reappointment of 3 CRMC appointees. And so if you are here in front of the committee, we can all hear you. And if you could direct your testimony to all 3 appointees, and if you could endeavor to keep it under 3 minutes, that would be wonderful.
I will do my best.
Thank you.
My name is Stuart Ross, and I live at 1026 East Shore Road in Jamestown. And thank you to Senator Oyer and your colleagues on the Environment and Agricultural Committee for allowing me to address you today on an issue that, as a lifelong island resident in Narragansett Bay, is very close to my heart. As the mission statement of CRMC says, in part, CRMC's primary responsibility is for the preservation, protection, development, and where possible, the restoration of the coastal areas of the state. Apart from the fact that the mission statement is lacking the word responsible in front of the word development, please note its first 2 words, preservation and protection. I would suggest that for every counselor, these should be the watchwords of every decision they make. And it should be the purview of this committee that only the most qualified individuals be selected and confirmed to serve on this extremely powerful state agency that has an impact on every single resident of our ocean state. So with regards to the issue before us, here are some recommendations for the committee's consideration of appointments to CRMC. That any counselor only serve a maximum of two terms of 3 years each. Several of the present counselors have been on for almost 20 years, as has been noted. Second, attendance should be required at 90% of the hearings, as really important decisions are made at each one, and there are several members right now who are habitually absent. Third, as many members right now come out of the business community but are tasked with making decisions that affect our coastal environment, some degree of environmental background should be a requirement, or at least some training by the state in environmental or marine science upon ascension to the council should be required. At least half of the council members should be required to visit any site they are considering for some kind of action and not simply leave that responsibility to staff. And I think we heard this with the JBY issue from others before me. Fifth, geographic diversity must be another requirement for service. Right now, there are 2 members who both live in Little Compton. I may be biased, but I'd strongly advocate for any new counselor to be a resident of Jamestown or any of several other small Narragansett Bay communities that are intimately affected by CRMC decisions. Finally, any reappointments should await the swearing in of our new governor. So I would ask that this committee slow down this process until he can become involved. And with the advice and counsel of this committee, the governor should take a long, hard look at the composition and the track record of the current council and look for ways to make it more effective, more responsive, and more balanced in order to better serve all residents of Rhode Island. And as previously mentioned, the Senate Resolution 1006 or 401 made that specific recommendation to convene a panel of 15 people and to look at this exact issue. And as far as we know, that has not been done. Finally, I agree with the previous speakers that Chair Cervenka should be reappointed, but that Councilors Coia and Gomez should not. So I'd welcome the opportunity to work with members and staff of this committee on these very important goals that I've just talked about. So thank you for listening.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Ross. Do any members of the committee have any questions for this witness? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Ross. Hope we will move on to our next witness.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Ross. Do any members of the committee have any questions?
Mr. Poyant, are you there?
Hi, I'm here.
Just so you know, we are on a little bit of a lag, but you are live with us. So if you wanted to turn down the volume, we can hear you through our WebEx software.
Okay.
So this is Chairwoman Oyer, and you are here in front of the Committee on Environment and Agriculture, and we're considering the reappointment of the 3 CRMC nominees. And I would ask that you direct your comments to all 3 nominees, and if you could keep it below 3 minutes, that would be wonderful.
I will do my best. Thank you, Madam Chair and the Senate Committee. My name is Andrew Poya. I am a resident in Providence. I'm calling to testify in opposition to reappointing the CRMC Chair Cervenka, the Vice Chair Coia, and Councilor Gomez. While my testimony focuses on Chairwoman Cervenka, it is applicable to all 3 of the appointees. I have attended countless hearings by different committees and councils throughout my life. I have heard some people call Chairwoman Cervenka professional. Professionally running a public hearing is making sure everyone from the public is treated fairly and has their time to safely speak. While I was in attendance of all 3 of the public hearings for the LNG facility in Providence, Chairwoman Cervenka at one point tried to close the hearing without letting all of the public speak. Fortunately, Senator Calkin was in attendance, and at her request, she requested that the public was able to speak, and fortunately, the Chairwoman Cervenka allowed that after trying to close it down. In addition, the Chairwoman was tone policing and cutting off people of color several times throughout the public hearings while they were trying to testify, while allowing white people such as myself and others to testify at any tone that they wanted and be able to go as off topic at times as well. At one point in the hearing, Chairwoman Cervenka even went so far as to call on the police to stop a woman of color in the middle of her testimony to not allow her to continue to speak, even though she still had time to speak. I've never been to the chairwoman's actions were not only unprofessional, but were also racist. I've never been to a hearing that was managed as poorly and unprofessional as this. Unfortunately, the vice chairman, as well as members of the council, failed to stop the chairwoman at any point in time throughout the hearings to commit harm to the people in attendance. In addition, the People's Port Authority has demanded not only these appointees be denied, but that future appointees represent the coastal environmental justice communities. While a lot of people think health is an individual choice, we have seen very clearly how communities of color have been most heavily impacted by COVID-19. Someone's zip code is heavily correlated to their health, starting with redlining and food deserts and allowing concentrations of polluted facilities in specific neighborhoods. Environmental justice communities are mapped based on the percentage of people of color and the percentage of the population that are low income. The CRMC's approval of the LNG facility in Providence, with over 100 people speaking in opposition in a neighborhood that has one of the highest rates of asthma in the country, demonstrates why representation matters. There are plenty of women of color who testified at the LNG hearings who live in Washington Park and south side of Providence who could take the place of chair for the CRMC. I strongly urge the committee to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poyant. Do any members of the committee have any questions for this witness? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Poyant. I appreciate your testimony to the committee. That does conclude the public testimony we have before us as far as who signed up to everyone's favorite radio call-in show. And so with that, I wanted to open it up to the nominees to be able to make any additional comments after this public testimony. So Mr. Coia, I see your hand up. Yes, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's a little difficult sitting back, hearing people hurl accusations and not have an opportunity immediately to respond. So I wasn't able to take some notes, but there were two, well, actually three that I did want to respond to. The gentleman that called and made reference to a backroom deal on Champlin's, a backroom meeting with Mr. Gomez, is 110% incorrect. There was no meeting with Mr. Gomez. I don't even know what the gentleman's talking about as it relates to that. In December, the end of December, was a scheduled CRMC meeting for us to address the Rhode Island Supreme Court sanctioned mediation as it relates to Champlin, at which it was a hearing held, or a mediation held. Discussions were taken without getting into the details of what took place at the mediation. Myself, Attorney DeSisto, Executive Director Willis, attorneys for Champlin's, the owners of the property were present. We did invite representatives from New Shoreham and Block Island. They declined to participate, and presiding was retired Supreme Court Justice Frank Williams. Nothing was out of the ordinary there. Nothing was backroom. It was as it's supposed to be done. And at the conclusion of that, ultimately a proposed joint memorandum of understanding was drawn up. It was brought before the council. The council voted on it, authorizing the particular individuals to execute it, and that's where we stand right now. So the representations by the gentleman are 100% inaccurate, wrong, and just misstatements. As it relates to some of the other call-ins, obviously you can tell they were contra to the vote. The vote was opposite of what they wanted. As I've said earlier, I've been on CRMC for many years. I've had the opportunity to listen to many applications. So I have had the opportunity to listen to testimony from both sides on many applications and afford its due weight and do my proper deliberation. So for them to say or insinuate that I wasn't affording due weight to their positions, again, is incorrect. If I don't say it verbally every single time, they need to know that I do take that into consideration and make that part of my deliberation process. They may not be happy with the result, but I can unequivocally state before all of you here that I do listen to everyone and take that into consideration. And lastly, and I'm sure Chair Cervenka is going to address this. But the comments that are made relative to that LNG hearing, I mean, if you weren't there, meaning you, the Senate committee members, you have to understand, I've been on CRMC since 2003. That hearing, those hearings were the most contentious hearings we've ever had. We had to have police present there. I remember, and I'll say it, telling my wife at the end of the hearing, we had to have the police walk us to our cars because of the insults and the threats made to us by the 100 or so people against that. And to the gentleman's comment, when he said Chair Cervenka abruptly stopped the matter when a woman of color was speaking, I'll tell you exactly what happened. At that point in time, she started throwing personal insults regarding our family members to us. And I'm sure Jennifer will state that at that point, it was getting real hot. And at that point, we needed to take a break. So at that point, yeah, immediately she said, we're going to take a quick break. I know she saw that things needed to be cooled down, and that's what happened. We took a short break. We went back. That woman spoke again. And I know she's a very vocal woman. I know who he's referencing. She was all over social media after that, as it relates to that. But what the people don't understand, as Jennifer indicated, there were many things that we could not take into consideration as part of our decision. So I'm echoing what Jennifer said there. Yeah, we listened to it. Yeah, as parents, we had concerns when they got up and they made references to their children and that. But unfortunately, we had a certain standard of review that we had to apply. And I'll state now, I think Chair Cervenka did a great job handling that. Unless any of you Senate members were there, you just have to rely on what I'm telling you, that it was pretty scary because you had a room full of 100 or so people yelling, screaming at us, talking over each other, and Chair Cervenka did the best she could. And for anyone to say that she did not afford everyone an opportunity to speak, 100% incorrect, because as Jen said, we had about 3 hearings, I think it was 3 lengthy hearings, and as she always does, she has everyone sign up and we go down the list. So I'm just giving you a little firsthand knowledge on that particular application because I was there, and the statements that were made are incorrect and not accurate. And I thank you for the opportunity to address those. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Coia. And I believe, yes, Chairwoman Cervenka, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to address, again, the LNG facility application, I'm not going to reiterate what Mr. Coia said, but it was at times a chaotic meeting, and there was a particular speaker who started yelling at the council members, and we had to take a break and cool off. It wasn't productive to an orderly meeting, and that happened from time to time during that very protracted proceeding. Again, I have to say it was a very difficult thing to go through to try to communicate to so many concerned citizens that we couldn't consider their chief concerns. As you heard from the public speaker just now, a lot had to do with health and health risks. We don't sit to decide if there's an impact as to health. That is not within our purview. That's not under the federal consistency review. I wish there was a place where they could take that and argue that and have a decision. It was not with us. And I felt horrible because, people were very concerned about their community. And, I support the Madam Chairwoman on exploring how environmental justice can be incorporated into decisions that we make, like with the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management. I just want to address the process. There was a comment that I didn't want people to speak, or I wasn't going to allow everyone to speak, but then I eventually agreed. There was an issue as to some confusion as to whether or not we could go to a third meeting. As I indicated earlier, under federal consistency, you are time constrained. So we believed at that time that we could only do 2 meetings. That turned out to be incorrect. We had more time, so we were able to afford a third meeting. At the end of the day, everyone who wanted to speak got to speak, although there was that hiccup. And as far as the speaker's request to have someone appointed from his affected community, we have 2 council positions that are vacant right now, and we can accept any letters of interest and resumes to be considered. So I would put that out to the speaker and to the community that if they're interested in serving on the council, that's something that, I don't make the decision, but we do get resumes and letters of interest that come in. And I think the pool right now is fairly small. So put that out. That's all I have to say. I support Mr. Coia and Mr. Gomez. We may have had a different decision on the Jamestown Boatyard, but I believe that they applied the law and to the facts as they viewed it, and followed the proper process. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Yes, Mr. Gomez, go ahead.
Okay, just to follow up, I certainly mirror Madam Chair Cervenka and Ray Coia's comments, Ray, the LNG hearings. I didn't particularly like it being escorted out to my car in the back parking lot by state police, and we needed police to intervene a number of times, and we needed to take breaks. I had people in my face wearing lobster uniforms, costumes, and with big signs calling me a racist. And it was all I could do to not respond to that. I had to sit there and take that. Although I did tip my nameplate over and noticed the name Gomez and wondered why I was being called a racist. That aside, I wanted to just mention on the JBY boatyard, I did not call it a taking. I need the committee members to know that. That was mentioned that we called it a taking. I did not do that. We used primarily the staff reports, discussions with staff. The determination was there was really no extension of the boatyard's perimeter. All of the work was being accomplished within their existing marine perimeter, and there was some minor dredging that needed to be taken, which was merely scraping away a small portion of dredge material to allow a deeper hull boat to dock. So I see that whole thing. There were numerous people complaining, and I really don't like to say it, but to me, it got to be a very well organized, not in my backyard undertaking. And not that I used that in the decision. The decisions were strictly in accordance with what staff had told me or told us, and the occurrence of all the work to be done was inside the existing area that had been permitted. So that's That's all I have to say on that.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Chairman Miller.
Yeah, I just want to comment on those LNG hearings, seeing as they've come up a few times, and I was at some of those hearings, and I wanted to give some context to people, not only for the community that those hearings took place in, but how they were conducted and how they were tried to be controlled and civil. And this shouldn't be misrepresented in this hearing that this was a totally uncivil hearing that didn't have any controls and that everybody was unruly. That's just not the case. There were some people that were unruly, and I think people should also put it in the context of this is a community, and this is just so everybody knows, I commute down Allens Avenue at least once a day, sometimes 4 times a day, straight through the community we're talking about, who is disproportionately not represented on the CRMC. And those 2 vacancies should be considered the communities where a lot of activity is going on, such as East Providence, Pawtucket, Providence, Cranston. A lot of this activity is going on there, and better representations from those communities should be considered. But it's also important to understand this community. This is a community that of mostly minorities for decades that had not had any input on decisions that seriously impacted their community. Whether it's going back to when they decided to put a highway straight through their community, to a hospital, a asphalt plant, several scrap yards, port with multiple activities that have environmental impact, the sewage treatment plant for at least 2 or 3 communities is right next to this, and this is all in a neighborhood that can walk to these facilities, and that have are within the study blast impact if something happens in that port. And so this is a community that has a history of being overlooked and unheard. And these hearings were one of the few times that they had to verbalize that frustration that comes from those decades of not having that input. And so it didn't go well at sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. And it should be done in the context of how infrequent they have the opportunity to have a formal input. And if they did not understand that CRMC was not in their purview to make all the decisions that impacted their community, at least I understand that, and I'm sure a lot of other committee members and CRMC members understand that it's health decisions, city and zoning decisions. A lot of this was federally mandated that it be a federal decision. And that is not clearly understood from community members that haven't had the experience to, chime in over decades on many, many of those decisions. So I just wanted to share the context of somebody who had been at those hearings on how frustrated this community is, not only during those hearings, but historically. And so the opportunity to have those 2 vacancies potentially taken by those communities would be, I think, totally appropriate.
Thank you, Chairman Miller. Do any other committee members have additional comment? Okay, hearing none, I would like to move forward with a vote, and it is most proper for us to do a vote one by one. And so I would entertain a motion for the reappointment of Raymond Coia to the Coastal Resource Management Council for a term expiring January 31st, 2024. Senator Archambault makes the motion, and Senator Coyne and Senator Rogers second it. Thank you. Mr. Clerk, could you please call the vote?
Senator Archambault.
Yes.
Senator Coyne.
Yes.
Senator DiMario.
Yes.
Senator Coleman.
Yes.
Senator Miller.
Yes.
Senator Rogers.
Yes.
Senator Valverde.
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Madam Chair, there are 8 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative.
Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Coia. Your name will be forwarded to the full Senate for advice and consent.
And Madam Chair, thank you to yourself and the fellow committee members for your confidence. And I do appreciate the comments that were made, especially the last ones by Senator Miller. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. I would now like to entertain a motion for the reappointment of Donald Gomez, appointed representing coastal community with population less than 25,000 to the Coastal Resource Management Council for a term expiring January 31st, 2024. Senator Coyne makes the motion, seconded by Senator Archambault. And Mr. Clerk, could you please call the vote?
Senator Archambault.
Yes.
Senator Coyne.
Yes.
Senator DiMario.
Yes.
Senator Coleman.
Yes.
Senator Miller.
Yes.
Senator Rogers.
Yes.
Senator Valverde.
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Madam Chair, there are 8 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Congratulations, Mr. Gomez. Your name will be forwarded to the full Senate for advice and consent.
I appreciate your appointment, and I will certainly take to mind the comments that I've heard tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And finally, our final advice and consent for consideration tonight, I would entertain a motion for the reappointment of Jennifer R. Cervenka, Chair, Public Member to the Coastal Resource Management Council for a term expiring January 31st, 2024. Can I hear a motion? Senator Coyne makes the motion, seconded by Senator Archambault and Senator Rogers. And Mr. Clerk, could you please call the vote?
Senator Archambault.
Yes.
Senator Coyne.
Yes.
Senator DiMario.
Yes.
Senator Coleman.
No.
Senator Miller.
Yes.
Senator Rogers.
Yes.
Senator Valverde.
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Madam Chair, there are 7 in the affirmative and 1 in the negative.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Congratulations, Chairwoman Cervenka. Your name will be advanced to the full Senate for advice and consideration.
Thank you for your vote and thoroughness, and I will certainly take into consideration and support what we've been discussing about more diverse representation on the council.
Thank you.